Well then, if all of my judges are ready, and the timer, the negative team. And Grayson? Yeah. And my audience, are you ready?
Yeah.
All right then, let's begin. Back during World War II, the United States and Russia enjoyed deep cooperation in fighting off the Axis powers, fighting for liberty and justice. Unfortunately, after the Cold War, this cooperation, after World War II that is, during the Cold War, this cooperation fell out, and the United States and Russia essentially became enemies. Fortunately, in more recent years, the two countries have been taking efforts to restore the cooperative relationship between the United States and Russia, something President Obama titled the reset button, and see our two nations become allies again. The affirmative team's plan is an enhancement of this policy. We've removed this Cold War relic, the Jackson-Vanik Amendment, which will further distance the Cold War from our current relationship, and will improve our relationship and enhance cooperation. That's what we offer to you today. Now, the negative team brought up a couple arguments that they believe exist against this course of action. So in my first speech today, I'll be showing you why these arguments are not actually true. We'll be taking a closer look at how they don't actually apply to the affirmative team's plan. Let's first go up to the argument about hypocrisy. I have a few responses to this argument. My first response is 17 years. 17 years. Now, the negative team came up and talked about how other countries are also in compliance with Jackson-Vanik. However, not a single one of these countries has been in compliance as long as Russia has. The average time from compliance to graduation is about 4 years per country, and for Russia it's been 17 years. This isn't hypocritical at all. The status quo is what is hypocritical. We've promised Russia time and time again that we will graduate them, but we haven't. The status quo is what is hypocritical. Voting for the affirmative plan gives you the chance of following through on our promises that we've made. It is not a hypocritical policy in any way, shape, or form. Russia has been in compliance longer than any nation, thus they must come first. And that's my second response, is the real world. The real world. In the real world, not everything is done at once. Congress has to look at different policy decisions in different lights. What could be one matter for Kazakhstan and Ukraine is a completely different matter for Russia. We're looking at just Russia in today's debate round and how the situation of graduation from Jackson-Vanik is justified. So this is not a hypocritical policy at all. We're looking at one policy, that with Russia, which is completely justified. Let's go down to the negative team's next point. In addressing our fact of an outdated policy. Now, in response to Russian compliance, they read piece of evidence how they believe Russia is not in compliance. Let's take a closer look at this piece of evidence. I have a few responses. My first response is state secrets. State secrets. Now, the Moscow Times, the article they read from, said in 2002, quote, under that law, people who have worked with classified data, which have 4 degrees of secrecy, can be banned from traveling outside Russia for up to 5 years, end quote. This is talking about national security of Russia, people who have state secrets. They have the right to be able to stop these people from leaving the country because they could actually spill national security secrets of Russia. This doesn't come into Jackson-Vanik, which we can see in my second response, full compliance. Full compliance. Now, as we read a piece of evidence for in our first speech, since 1994, the President has annually found Russia in full compliance. That includes 2002. Under the official interpretation, Russia is in compliance. This law doesn't actually factor into the Jackson-Vanik Amendment. Given Russia is in full compliance with Jackson-Vanik, we are free to graduate them if we so choose, which we believe is the most beneficial course of action in today's debate round. Russia is in compliance and does deserve to be graduated. Let's go to the negative team's next point. They talked about how Jackson-Vanik is like a speeding sign, that we always need to keep it in place. And if we remove Jackson-Vanik, Russia might stop allowing free immigration. This simply isn't so. I have a few responses. My first response is full compliance. Full compliance. Russia has been in compliance with Jackson-Vanik for 17 years now. There is no reason whatsoever for them to stop being in compliance. The Cold War is over. The Soviet Union is gone. They are allowing people to leave the country. There's no reason for them to stop allowing free immigration when Jackson-Vanik is gone. My second response is free travel agreements. Free travel agreements. Russia has made agreements with other countries for free travel. Therefore, they won't be stopping those agreements anytime soon. Mark Adamnis, an MPhil degree in Russian and East European Studies, said in June 2010, quote, Russia has been concluding visa-free travel agreements with a wide variety of countries such as Brazil and Turkey, and has made it widely known that it would very much like to have visa-free travel with the EU as well, end quote. So Russia has travel agreements. They're not going to stop allowing free immigration anytime soon. There's no reason to keep Jackson-Vanik in place. It's not doing us any good, only harm. Let's go to the negative team's next argument. They talked about how Jackson-Vanik, they believe, is the only human rights leverage tool we have left. I have a few responses. My first response is other tools. Other tools. Now, the negative team is acting as if Jackson Vanik is the only thing we have left to help human rights in Russia. This isn't so. There's the example of democracy aid. U.S. aid country profile said in May 2010 for Russia, quote, U.S. aid helps Russians build an informed and active citizenry, strengthen the rule of law, promote human rights, and develop local social services, end quote. Democracy aid is given to Russia to improve their human rights and rule of law. It's actually much more effective than Jackson Vanik. Finkel, Breslin, and Seligson and Tate, all PhDs, said January 28, 2008, quote, the positive impact is that $10 million of United States democracy and governance aid would produce about a five-fold increase in the amount of democratic change that the average country would be expected to achieve in any given year, end quote. So there are other tools, such as democracy aid in place, that actually work. Jackson Vanik is in no way, shape, or form the last tool we have left. When Jackson Vanik is gone, we will still have other human rights tools in place in Russia. Now let's see my second response of ineffective leverage. Ineffective leverage. Now the negative team came up and said that Jackson Vanik is human rights leverage. As we read evidence for in our first speech, continuing to use Jackson Vanik actually harms human rights in Russia. So under a negative ballot, you'd be voting for continuing to try to use this on Russia when it's simply not working. The affirmative team believes it's time for the United States to realize that Jackson Vanik does not work, it does not actually allow us to increase our foreign policy. And we need to realize that it's time to get rid of Jackson Vanik so we can increase our relationship with Russia, so we can increase our trust and actually get what we want done. They talked about the waiver. There's a waiver discussion, yes, with Jackson Vanik. My response, though, is only emigration. Only emigration. Now, the negative team came up and said that there's a waiver discussion, talked about the terms of the waiver, which is only emigration. When the waiver discussion comes in place, Russia and the United States only talk about whether Russia allows free emigration and should they get the waiver that year. So that doesn't actually talk about human rights at all. So now we've seen that those arguments are false. Let's go to the argument about the WTO. I have a few responses to this argument. My first response is no guarantee. No guarantee. Russia has been trying to get into the WTO for almost 2 decades now. There's no guarantee that they're suddenly going to get in the next couple of months. If you want a 100% chance of Russia getting graduated, an affirmative ballot is necessary. And my second response is graduation first. Graduation first. If you wait for the WTO, you'll miss out on the relational and credibility benefits of the United States. Samuel Sherp, a PhD in political science, said in July 2009, quote, lifting Jackson Vanik before Russia's WTO accession is important. It would improve the atmosphere of the relationship and thus make it easier for the United States to cooperate with Russia on issues such as Iran and Afghanistan that are critical to our national security, end quote. So you don't get those benefits under a negative ballot. Russia will be graduated, but you won't get the benefits. It won't mean anything under a negative ballot. So we see that at the end of today, this is not a hypocritical policy. It is completely justified. The leverage that the negative team offers you doesn't work and only makes things worse, and you'll only get the benefits of graduating Russia from Jackson Vanik under an affirmative ballot. I ask you to realize that Jackson Vanik doesn't work anymore, and that it's time to move on so that we can increase our foreign policy goals. Thank you. Now, I'll take any questions from the next speaker.
How are you doing, Rowan?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Now, let's go ahead and talk about your response to my hypocrisy argument.
All right.
Now, you mentioned that Russia has been compliance for 17 years, correct?
Yep, longer than any other country.
All right, so how long have these other countries been compliance?
The average time from compliance to graduation is about 4 years.
But how long have these countries been compliance, such as Kazakhstan?
Kazakhstan? I didn't read evidence about Kazakhstan, given we're focusing on Russia. If you could bring up evidence of Kazakhstan, then we could have a debate about
All
that.
right, thank you. But they are in compliance, correct?
I believe they are in compliance.
All right.
I didn't read the evidence about this in my speech. I was focusing on Russia.
All right, now, do you have a list of the requirements that a country needs to meet in order to be graduated from Jackson Vanik?
They're in the Jackson Vanik Amendment, which I believe you have on your table. It's basically free immigration and then a market economy, both of which Russia complies with.
Free immigration, all right.
Yeah.
All right, now, let's go ahead and talk about the democracy aid point you
All right.
mentioned. Now, isn't it true that Russia actually abuses our democracy activists?
I haven't seen the evidence. This is today's debate round. I was talking about how the democracy aid is effective and actually provides democratic change in Russia.
All right, do you believe that the Russian government wants this democracy aid?
I didn't see any evidence to this debate round. I believe it's rather relevant. I was bringing it up just to show that Jackson Vanik isn't the only human rights tool in place.
All right, now you mentioned under the point of leverage in response. Now, did you read evidence in this speech saying that it has absolutely no leverage? Or did you simply refer back to the one in your case?
I referred back to my partner's leverage from the former ambassadors of the Soviet Union and a PhD in political science.
All right, so no new evidence was brought up on this point, correct?
No, we believe that the evidence read in the 1AC was not directly refuted by the negative speakers.
All right, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you.